The jukebox in Danny's tavern crooned an old country tune as the smell of beer and fried wings hung thick in the air. The kind of place where the wood paneling was stained with decades of cigarette smoke, and the regulars could tell who didn't belong the second they walked in. When Daniel and David Thompson entered that night, conversations dipped for a moment. Two tall black men in dark coats, calm and silent, didn't fit the usual crowd of off-duty cops and small-town locals who treated the bar like their clubhouse. They found a table near the corner, ordered 2 beers, and said little. They didn't need to. The twins had a quiet understanding that didn't require words. Their eyes communicated what others would spend paragraphs saying. But across the bar, 3 men watched them with growing irritation. Sergeant Brett Coleman, Officer Jake Morrison, and Officer Rick Torres. All 3 were off duty, but their arrogance was never switched off. Brett, red-faced and broad-shouldered, had already drunk half a bottle of whiskey. Jake, younger and jittery, looked for trouble to prove himself. Rick, the oldest of them, just wanted to avoid conflict but lacked the courage to stop it. Brett slammed his empty glass down and grinned crookedly. "Hey, Rick, you see those 2? Look like they got lost." Rick sighed. "They're just customers, Brett. Leave it." Jake snorted. "Customers? They're not from around here. I say we remind them whose bar this is." Brett stood, unsteady but fueled by beer and bias. He straightened his badge chain under his shirt, then swaggered over. The chatter in the room dimmed. Even the bartender, Luis, tense behind the counter. He knew that look in Brett's eyes. "Evening, gentlemen," Brett said, voice laced with mock courtesy. "You 2 lost." Daniel looked up from his beer, calm, composed, with the kind of stillness that made loud men uneasy. "No," he said, "just getting a drink." "Yeah." Brett smirked. "This ain't exactly Tourist Central. You from around here?" "Just passing through," David replied, his tone cool but polite. "Passing through," Jake echoed, sauntering up behind Brett. "You got ID on you?" Daniel frowned. "Are you on duty?" Brett's smirk twitched. "Does it matter?" "It does if you're asking for ID," Daniel said evenly. The air thickened. People shifted in their seats, pretending not to watch. Jake leaned closer, alcohol heavy on his breath. "You got a problem with the law, pal?" David's jaw flexed slightly, but his tone stayed level. "Only when the law forgets it's supposed to protect, not provoke." That line hit Brett's pride like a slap. "You trying to tell me how to do my job?" "No," Daniel said softly. "Just reminding you what it is." Rick finally came up behind them, voice low. "Brett, leave it. They're not bothering anyone." But Brett wasn't listening anymore. He saw 2 confident men who didn't flinch under his stare. It made something ugly crawl up from his gut. He slammed his hand on their table. "You don't talk to me like that in my bar. You got that?" Luis, the bartender, set down the rag he was holding. He'd seen this too many times. "Brett, you need to cool off. Let them be." "Stay out of this, Luis," Brett barked, eyes still on the twins. "They can finish their beer somewhere else." Daniel slowly rose, his posture calm but commanding. "We'll go. No need for trouble." "Too late," Jake muttered, stepping closer. David stood too, eyes flicking briefly to the security camera above the bar, noting its angle. "Let's go, Dan," he said. They started toward the door, but Brett followed. "Not so fast. You think you can walk out after disrespecting me?" Daniel turned, meeting Brett's stare head-on. "You should stop now." "Oh, yeah." Brett sneered. "Or what?" The quiet confidence in Daniel's voice unsettled even Rick. "Or you'll regret it." The twins stepped outside. The night air was cold, laced with the hum of streetlights. Behind them, the door swung open again as Brett and Jake followed, Rick trailing reluctantly. Louis sighed and pulled out his phone. He didn't know what was about to happen, but he knew he needed to record it. The parking lot showdown. The parking lot was half empty, shadows stretching long beneath flickering lamps. Daniel leaned against his car, watching as the officers approached. "Thought I told you to get out of town," Brett growled. "You did," Daniel said, "and we're doing that." "Not before we make sure you're clean," Jake said, pulling out his baton. "Hands on the hood." "No warrant." No probable cause, David replied. You're drunk and out of line. Probable cause is you disrespecting an officer, Brett snapped. Daniel shook his head. No, that's ego, not law. Jake moved first, grabbing David's arm. The motion was quick, sloppy. Before Jake could blink, David sidestepped, twisted his wrist, and gently, but decisively, redirected him backward. No violence, just perfect control. Jake stumbled and cursed. What the hell was that? Brett barked. Defense, David said. Something you'd understand if you'd ever been trained. Brett's face turned crimson. He lunged toward Daniel, shoving him hard against the car. The metallic clang echoed through the lot. Daniel didn't resist, but his eyes changed. The calm gave way to something colder, sharper. You sure you want to do that? Yeah, Brett hissed. I do. Luis filmed from the doorway, whispering under his breath. Come on, Dan, don't let him. David took a step forward, but Daniel's hand lifted slightly, stopping him. They'd faced worse than this. Ambushes, raids, betrayal under fire. This was just another battlefield, smaller and dirtier. Brett started searching Daniel's pockets. What's this? He said, pulling out a wallet. He flipped it open, squinting at the ID inside, but too drunk to focus. Daniel Thompson. He smirked. Military? That's supposed to scare me. Only if you understood what it means, Daniel said quietly. Jake, rubbing his wrist, snorted. You're just a has-been vet. You don't matter anymore. Rick finally snapped. Jake, shut up. Brett, let's go. They're recording, look. Brett turned. Luis was standing there, phone raised. Put that away. Brett barked. No. Luis said, voice trembling but firm. Not this time. Daniel looked directly at him. Keep it rolling. Jake swung his baton in frustration. The metal whooshed through the air, missing David by an inch. David didn't flinch. Instead, his hand shot out, caught the baton mid-swing, and stopped it dead. The silence afterward was deafening. Careful, David said softly, lowering the weapon and handing it back to him like a teacher returning a student's toy. You're dangerously close to assaulting an officer. Brett blinked, confused. What did you just say? Daniel stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. My brother's not a civilian. Neither am I. But you wouldn't know that because you never asked. Jake sneered. What are you, FBI? Daniel's faint smile didn't reach his eyes. Something like that. Then came the sound that would change everything. A car door shutting. From the edge of the parking lot, a woman in a dark suit stepped into the light. Sharp heels clicked on pavement. She carried herself like someone used authority. Officers Coleman, Torres, and Morrison, she called. Step away from those men. All three turned. Who the hell are you? Brett demanded. Assistant District Attorney Lisa Monroe, she said, flashing her badge. And I just witnessed enough here to end all your careers. Her eyes shifted to the twins. Captain Daniel Thompson. Commander David Thompson. I was told you were in town. The three officers froze. Luis's phone shook as he zoomed in, capturing every stunned face. Brett stammered. See, Commander? Captain? You're... Daniel finally looked at him, eyes like steel. We tried to walk away. David added quietly, You made sure we couldn't. Lisa folded her arms. Congratulations, officers. You didn't just harass two veterans. You assaulted two of the most decorated men in U.S. military history. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint buzz of the flickering streetlight and the uneven breathing of the three officers. Assistant District Attorney Lisa Monroe stepped forward, her heels clicking with measured precision. Every movement screamed authority. Put your hands where I can see them, she ordered. Brett hesitated. You can't. I can, she cut in sharply. Because what I just saw was a felony. You assaulted two men without cause, attempted to destroy evidence, and racially profiled citizens on camera. That's not just career-ending Sergeant Coleman. That's prison time. Rick slowly raised his hands, pale and trembling. Jake followed a second later, the baton slipping from his fingers to the ground with metallic clatter. Brett clenched his fists. You think anyone's going to believe them over cops? Lisa's cold smile said everything. They'll believe the video. And the men you assaulted aren't anyone. They're national heroes. Daniel finally spoke, voice level but laced with steel. You really should have walked away, Sergeant. Yeah. Brett snarled, desperate now. You think you're better than us? You think your medals make you untouchable? David's gaze hardened. No, but they mean I fought for a flag that you disgrace every time you wear that badge. Brett's anger faltered. He looked from one twin to the other, seeing not just calm but power, the kind of presence that came from facing death and walking away from it countless times. Lisa motioned toward the bar. Luis, you still recording? Every second, the bartender said, voice steady despite his shaking hands. And it's already backed up to the cloud. Lisa nodded. Good. Because by sunrise, this footage will be in the hands of Internal Affairs and the state's attorney's office. Brett turned pale. Rick, still in shock, whispered, Commander, you really Navy? David reached into his coat and handed him an ID. Official. Undeniable. The embossed seal gleamed under the streetlight. United States Navy Special Warfare Command. Rick swallowed hard. My God! Lisa crossed her arms. Commander David Thompson, Silver Star Navy Cross and 3 tours. Captain Daniel Thompson, Army Ranger, 2 Bronze Stars, Distinguished Service Cross. You two just picked the wrong men to bully. Jake dropped his head, the reality sinking in. We didn't know. Daniel's tone stayed calm but firm. You never asked. You just assumed. Brett muttered. You think one video's going to ruin us? You don't know how this town works. Lisa's expression turned ice cold. Then let me introduce you to how my office works. She lifted her phone and made a single call. Sheriff? ADA Monroe. I need immediate dispatch to Danny's Tavern. 3 off-duty officers under arrest. Charges include assault, abuse of power, and misconduct. Bring cuffs. The call that changed everything. By the time the first patrol cars arrived, the small town quiet had fractured into flashing red and blue lights. Reporters showed up within an hour. Someone had already leaked the video online. It spread faster than wildfire. 3 cops assault decorated veterans, read the first headline. Then, local heroes humiliated by police, justice incoming. The footage was impossible to defend. Every racist remark, every shove, every sneer, all on camera. Millions watched as the truth unfolded frame by frame. Too calm, restrained men facing 3 armed bullies who mistook silence for weakness. The internet erupted. Veterans groups called for accountability. Civil rights advocates demanded reform. Even active duty officers began sharing the video with disgust. In a joint press statement the next day, the governor called it a disgrace to the badge. The police commissioner suspended all 3 officers without pay pending investigation. But the real reckoning came when the twins themselves spoke. The interview. A week later, Daniel and David sat in a televised interview, side by side, dressed in civilian suits. They looked less like victims and more like leaders delivering a lesson. The host, visibly respectful, asked, Captain Thompson, why didn't you fight back? Daniel gave a small, tired smile. Because fighting back is what they wanted. They wanted to justify their violence. Sometimes the strongest move isn't to strike. It's to stand. David added, We faced men with guns overseas who treated us with more dignity than those 3 did that night. That says something about what's broken here. The clip went viral again. Their words hit harder than any punch could. The consequences. Brett Coleman was charged with assault, misconduct, and obstruction of justice. Jake Morrison faced suspension and mandatory retraining, while Rick Torres resigned before the hearings began, haunted by guilt. Luis, the bartender, became an unlikely hero. He testified fearlessly, saying, I filmed because I've seen it happen before, just never men who could fight back. Maybe now people will believe us. The town mayor, under pressure from the public, ordered a full audit of the police department. The chief of police issued an apology on live TV. But none of that mattered as much as the message the Thompson brothers left behind. The return, A month later, Daniel and David returned to Danny's Tavern. The place was quieter now. A new bartender greeted them nervously, but when she recognized them, her eyes widened. "You're them," she whispered. From the video, Daniel smiled kindly. "We're just men who came for a drink." Luis emerged from the back, now managing the bar himself. He grinned. "You came back." "Had to," David said, setting a folded flag patch on the counter. "Closure." They sat in the same booth. For a moment, it was peaceful again. Luis leaned closer. "You know, that video, it changed things. The sheriff cleaned house. The department's getting new training. You made people listen." Daniel took a sip of his drink. "We didn't want attention, just respect." David nodded. Respect shouldn't have to be earned through pain. Outside, kids were chalking messages on the sidewalk. "Justice served." "Heroes among us." The twins watched silently. For once, they didn't need to say a word. The final confrontation. 3 weeks later, Brett Coleman's hearing drew a crowd. The courtroom was full. Reporters, townspeople, veterans, officers from other cities. When Brett was brought in, he looked smaller somehow. Deflated. Gone was the swagger. Lisa Monroe stood at the prosecution table. Calm, precise, relentless. "Your Honor," she said, "this isn't about one bad night. It's about a culture that allows arrogance to wear a badge. Tonight, accountability begins." She called Daniel to the stand. The courtroom hushed. Daniel stood tall. "I've spent 20 years serving this country," he said. "I've led soldiers into war zones where we treated enemy combatants with more humanity than these men showed us that night. Wearing a uniform doesn't give you power over others. It gives you responsibility. And when you abuse that, you dishonor every person who ever wore it with pride." Gasps filled the room. The judge nodded solemnly. By the end of the hearing, Brett was found guilty on all charges. His badge was revoked, and his sentence included 2 years in federal prison and a lifetime ban from law enforcement. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, microphones flashing. Lisa stood beside the twins. "Any comment, gentlemen?" One journalist shouted. David looked at his brother. "Only this," he said. "Justice doesn't wear a badge or a uniform. It wears truth." The epilogue. Weeks passed. Life slowly returned to normal. Daniel returned to working with veterans' outreach programs, helping soldiers transition to civilian life. David resumed instructing recruits at a naval base on ethics and leadership, a course now required after their case. And in every police academy across the state, recruits were shown a short training clip, the body cam and phone footage from that night. At the end of it, a single line from Lisa Monroe echoed in every classroom. "Congratulations, gentlemen. You didn't just harass 2 veterans. You assaulted 2 of the most decorated men in U.S. military history." It became more than a warning. It became a reminder that respect isn't earned through fear or uniform. It's earned through humanity. That night at Danny's Tavern faded into legend. 2 brothers who refused to bow. 3 cops who learned what real strength looked like. A video that changed everything. And a town that would never again forget what it meant to stand for what was right. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet, calm, and absolute.